Alright, here's part 2 of the Les Paul Faded. We're going to go ahead and use some Tru-oil. This is Birchwood KC Tru-oil. You can buy the larger bottles from their website. We're going to put 6 coats on in total, and we're going to put this first coat on relatively thick. Then what we're going to do is let it sit for about 24 hours. We'll come on and apply the second coat. Same thing with the third coat, fourth coat. And then for the fifth and sixth coat, what we'll do is we'll sand in between with the Tru-oil itself. And then we'll go ahead and apply one more coat then to seal it off. So I've got about 6 coats on here. I didn't film that whole process, but I'm going to show you some of the highlights. And that first coat goes on real thick. And we're going to use it to really try and fill in anything that doesn't look right. And like I said, Tru-oil is one of my favorite finishing products. I love the way it looks, love the way it goes on. So I'm applying this today with just a paper towel and the bottle and just going on and let this soak it in. And this maple top doesn't look book matched anymore. Just looking at the figure and the lines, it's definitely not book matched. It's just two similar-ish type of pieces of wood. We'll go ahead and we'll apply the Tru-oil on the back side here as well. Then what we'll show next is the full binding. I'm going to use the real wood binding, and I'm going to scrape the top here to get it to look like the cream binding, which is a neat effect.
So this wood binding on the side that I've been doing is really starting to take a life of its own on. I'm actually really happy with the way it's turning out. So what I've done is I've gone a little bit deeper onto the body, and what I'm doing is taking the razor blade and just pulling this across so it gets to look a little bit thicker, like a real Les Paul cream binding. So I've just been going back and forth and making this slightly wider. I think it went maybe a little bit too wide here, but I've got a pretty much consistent look across the guitar just by dragging this. So I've got the wood binding here, which really matches the top. And like I said, this was all dinged up and scratched up before. So all I did was drag this in a couple of spots to even it out. But like I said, this one was really beat up. And so where the paint had sort of chipped, I just rubbed it a little bit to chip it off a little bit more. So it's got a nice vintage look. Alright, so for the third coat of Tru-oil here, got some 600 grit sandpaper, and what I'm going to do is actually use the Tru-oil and wet sand the guitar. My brother taught me this trick, and what it does is helps nail down the coat, and then it also fills some of the pores and grain. So we'll just take some Tru-oil. You definitely don't want to do this with a really aggressive grit sandpaper. So 600 is very, very fine. I think maybe you could do this with 400 grit. But I was wet sanding with boiled linseed oil at 600 or higher. So we'll just go ahead and do the whole top here.
So after I'm done sanding with this Tru-oil, we'll put one more coat on after this to sort of even it off. Then we'll go ahead and leave it. So we'll do the front and the back here and get it nice and level and use whatever is left to sort of fill in any of the grain spots or whatnot that don't look right, which is really the nice effect with sanding the Tru-oil. We'll wipe this down, let it dry, and hit it with one more coat, and then that's how it really looks nice and clean. You get a nice sheen, consistent sheen across the body. One thing you'll see a little bit later on is I think I may have sanded a little bit too much on the top, but that's sort of lessons learned as I'm going through. I didn't realize how thin this Aquafortis Regent stuff is. I thought there was a little bit more, but definitely a cool aged looking body.
Next up, we're going to age the hardware, and I'm going to use the same muriatic acid that I used in my other video. This is 31% hydrogen chloride and 68% inert ingredients. What we'll do is we'll pour a little bit on the bottom here, about a 1/4 inch, and then I got these trays that I'll drop in, and I'll let this age for about 3 hours. And I didn't want everything to get aged, so I taped off some of the spots that I don't want aging. You know, the threads. I'm not going to actually do the posts for the bridge, but I'll do the chrome tailpiece. Then I've got the tuner peg holes right here. I'm not actually going to do the screws, but I'm going to do the washer piece. We'll take the muriatic acid. Got enough just to cover the bottom here. I'll get my trays. Put the trays in. Got my top. I'm going to cover this and let it sit for 3 hours this time. I'll come by and check it maybe once. I won't film that. But we'll let it sit longer. This is nice quality hardware, so it'll take a little bit longer to age versus some of the crappy stuff I had before. So we'll see in a couple hours. So I took the hardware out of the acid, and I was really impressed with how long it actually took to age this stuff. The Gibson tuners, the deluxe tuners here, this is about 12 hours of aging. They didn't really age after 3 hours. I was really surprised that nothing changed, so I decided to just leave them when I went to work and came home, and they were looking pretty good. So I pulled those out first, and then the bridge, and then the stop tail piece and the bridge, after 12 hours, really didn't look aged at all. After 3, it didn't look like anything had happened. After 12, I was like, wow. So I left it for another, essentially 24. And it came out really nice. You can tell the high quality of the hardware here. The black, since it was sitting on the bottom, doesn't even look aged. You know, it looks nice and new. And the top piece here looks aged. So I was really impressed with the quality of the hardware from Gibson here. It's not cheap and flimsy like the stuff I bought off eBay from China. It's definitely a call out in terms of paying what you're getting for. The hardware here is actually really nice. So what we'll just let this sit, we'll clean it off, and then we'll get ready to assemble the Les Paul here. So for the hardware that I aged, specifically the tuning pegs, what I'm going to do is take a little bit of oil, 3-in-1 oil, and drop it down inside and lubricate the gear. Don't want it to rust. These don't really come apart. We'll just let the oil drip down. And we'll go ahead and spin the gear a bunch of times. You can see the oil has dripped in. We'll go through and make sure these don't get too bad. can see the oil dripping through on the little hole right here, which is a good sign. And it's moving much better. So we'll just let these sit for a couple days. Get the oil to dry off, and we'll go. Alright, so here's the Les Paul completed. I just need to get some control knobs from the ones that broke. That plastic was real brittle. Hardware's looking good. Pickups are sounding nice. Got this thing tuned up. Happy with the way it turned out. One thing that I didn't like is when I was sanding along the sides here, I sanded a little bit too much of the finish off. I didn't realize how light of a finish this Aquafortis stuff is. So I may go back and put this on. But the guitar looks nice. What I did is I took some steel wool and I just rubbed it on the top at the end just to knock down some of the sheen. So it definitely has more of a vintage look. The binding looks pretty cool. And the places where the paint was all scraped up, it's got a nice worn-in look. Didn't really want that newish finish since this had so many zings and dings on the back here. Like I said, I left the neck alone. It was plecked, so there was really no reason to play around with the upper neck here in any way. So I've got a custom amp here. Let's play it and see how this thing sounds.